Finally, one of the biggest questions this offseason has finally been answered. Baker Mayfield is a Panther. The Browns screwed him over to ridiculous lengths, and now they get to eat a shit sandwich while Baker gets a fresh start in Carolina. And honestly, this is going to make or break his career. There were plenty of rumors connecting Baker Mayfield to the Seahawks, but ultimately, it was the Panthers that swooped in to get Baker for, well, just a conditional fifth. I have to imagine that Seattle could have given up a bit more than that if they really wanted him. The pick Carolina traded isn't even for next year. It's literally 2 years away, but depending on what Baker does in Carolina, it could turn into a fourth. The Panthers are only paying him $4.85 million of his salary. The Browns will pay the other $10.5 million. And Baker agreed to convert the other $18.8 million of his contract into incentives to push the deal through. Clearly, the Browns had absolutely no leverage in this situation. They only got a 5th round pick and had to eat most of his salary. And it wasn't due to a lack of value of Baker. It more so came down to everyone in the league knowing that the Browns had to trade Baker because of Deshaun Watson. I mean, I can't honestly argue that Watson isn't a transcendent talent who may dominate the league for years to come, at least if he's allowed to play. Since he was drafted back at the 2017 NFL Draft by Houston, he's led the league in passing yards, been named to the Pro Bowl 3 times, and owns a ton of different NFL records. And it's hard to blame the Texans for trading him away. Houston got an absolute haul in exchange for Watson, plus they got rid of one hell of a headache. The Texans traded Watson in a 6th for 3 first-round picks, yes, 3, a 3rd round pick, and 2 4th round picks. They got an absolute haul. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter whether or not Watson is suspended. That Baker Mayfield bridge has been burnt for a while. There have even been reports that Baker's been frustrated with the Browns his entire career, which is totally fair, but most importantly, was angry that they didn't tell him that they were meeting with Watson. Baker eventually requested a trade after it was reported that a Browns source said that the team wanted an adult at the quarterback position. By the way, that's an absolutely hilarious thing to say if your ultimate goal is to trade for a guy in the middle of a legal battle because he has 22 sexual assault allegations. Real adult. Now, Cleveland has to go down to Carolina in week 1 and play Baker Mayfield, likely with Jacoby Brissett having to start because their adult at the position is suspended. And I just have to say, this is the most Browns thing ever. They finally see some kind of success thanks to a guy they used a 1st overall pick on, only to piss him off and end up with a massive contract with a dude who's facing serious legal trouble for sexual assault. That is just so Browns. Now, Baker Mayfield gets a fresh start in Carolina with a somewhat competent organization just 4 years after Cleveland took him at the 2018 NFL Draft, and he helped take a Browns team that was 1-31 in the 2 years before he got there into a somewhat respectable team. He even won a playoff game in 2020. Let me reiterate, he won a playoff game for the Browns. That hadn't happened since Cleveland became a team again, like back in 1999. Baker came in and made his NFL debut down 14-0 and led the Browns back to a victory to snap a 19-game winless streak. The Browns ended up going 7-8-1, their best record since 2007. Unfortunately, he regressed a bit the next season, and Cleveland and Baker struggled. But 2020 proved to be a breakout year. Baker threw 26 touchdowns to only 8 interceptions, and Cleveland went 11-5 and won their first playoff game since 1994. Everything was peachy in Cleveland until Baker had a down year in 2021. But there is a caveat to that. He played with a partially torn labrum for almost the entire season and eventually underwent surgery. Simply put, playing through that injury cost him millions and his job. That's just tough. He had a down year, and no, he was never going to be as talented as Watson. But what if he was healthy? I have to imagine that he's still the Browns quarterback. And it's important to note that in his first 3 seasons in Cleveland, Baker had 3 different head coaches, 4 if you include Greg Williams. Hugh Jackson was in charge when he got there, Freddie Kitchens in 2019, and finally, Kevin Stefanski. Baker hasn't exactly had the easiest road in the NFL, but he still fought through adversity really well, and he'll have to do it again in Carolina. The main guy Baker is going to compete with for the Panthers starting gig is Sam Darnold. Carolina went out and traded for Sam Darnold last offseason, but I can't imagine the Panthers are married to the idea of him being their guy. He's about to play on the 5th year of his deal with no contract in 2023. And oh yeah, he sucked in 2021. Like 9 touchdowns to 13 interceptions bad. Ironically, those two were constantly compared at the 2018 NFL Draft to decide who should be the first overall pick. Clearly, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson probably should have gotten a few more looks, but now Darnold and Baker essentially have to battle to see whose career gets to continue. And honestly, at this point, it's hard to believe that Darnold could beat Baker in a quarterback competition. But that's not it. There's another wrinkle to the conversation. Matt Corral. Matt Corral very well may be the future of the Panthers, and now that depends on how Baker Mayfield fares. The Panthers could end up being the perfect spot for Corral at the end of the day. He needs to sit and learn as a rookie, and it's going to be relatively easy for him to learn when he's competing and watching Darnold and Baker day in and day out. He's what makes the Baker situation so interesting, because the Panthers obviously like him for a reason. Corral really dominated through the air and on the ground in his redshirt junior year. He was named second team All-SEC, had 11 touchdowns on the ground, over 600 yards, still passed for over 3,300 yards again, and had 20 touchdowns to only 5 interceptions. He showed plenty of promise. And whether it's Corral, Darnold, or likely Baker behind center, the Panthers have a decent roster to carry the load. Christian McCaffrey is always the main guy that comes to mind. He's an elite running back that can be a quarterback's best friend because he can run, or you can stretch him outside to catch passes. And that's huge for a running back. He can be the security blanket that a quarterback needs. On the outside, DJ Moore is a very capable number 1 wide receiver, and he's gone for over 1,000 yards in the last 3 seasons, and this offseason, he got his bag. Carolina still has Robbie Anderson, who I think is pretty damn good and could actually be a big threat. Plus, Carolina is hoping that Terrace Marshall can find his footing in 2022 after a bad rookie year. Most of the worries for the offense come on that offensive line. To put it lightly, they really sucked. Carolina had one of the worst offensive lines in 2021, but you can't say they didn't try to address it this offseason. The Panthers had the 6th pick at the draft and took Ikem Ekwonu, a tackle out of NC State. Ekwonu was talked about as going as high as 1st overall at one point, and he's one hell of a player, and I can promise you that Baker is going to love him. Baker Mayfield is going to be one of the most talked about players this offseason as he learns the ropes in Carolina and is competing with Sam Darnold and Matt Corral. Like a lot of people, I view Baker as a clear-cut upgrade from Sam Darnold, and for the Panthers, this is an amazing situation to be in. It's really low risk, high reward. Baker could explode and be a stud. Then maybe Carolina has their dude for the future. If not, well, his contract is over after the season, and you only really gave up a 5th rounder for him anyways. So who really cares? It may be a question of whether or not Baker is actually healthy and what he'll look like post shoulder surgery. But without any doubt, 2022 is definitely a prove-it year for Baker Mayfield. And by this time next year, he could either be without a job or be signing a big contract.